What does it mean to be an actor in South Africa? Is it truly all the glitz and glam of red carpet premieres? Or is there something deeper? Something broken beneath the surface? Welcome to SAGA Speaks. This is the official podcast for the South African Guild of Actors. In our very first episode, we are joined by a global voice in performer rights. This is someone who's helped build real power for actors across the globe through something called collective bargaining. I know this might just sound like another term. It's not. This is about leveling the playing field, giving performers a seat at the table instead of just a place on the call sheet. This episode is part 1 of 2. If you truly care about storytelling in South Africa, you're at the right place. This is SAGA Speaks.
Hi everyone, my name is Jack. This is SAGA Speaks, the podcast where we have the conversations the creative sector doesn't want you to have. With me, a very special guest. Michael Crosby is a unionist, an expert in collective bargaining, an advisor, and a former Secretary General of the International Federation of Actors and a former president of the Australian Actors Union. Michael, good to have you in South Africa.
It's been fantastic. Thanks, Jack.
How many days are you here now?
3. It feels like about 3 weeks, the way you and Carlin are working me to death.
Okay, no, that's so unfair. But we love the fact that you're here because we very rarely get an opportunity to sit and work with somebody who is considered to be an expert in the field, because South Africa still has so much to learn, just in the creative sector though. That's an important point to make. South Africa knows unionization and we know collective bargaining.
Sure.
Just not in the creative sector.
If only the rest of the world had your industrial relations legislation.
Absolutely. And we worked very hard at developing those worker rights. Since 1994, we've had some very progressive labor reforms that came out on the side of the worker. So we are trying, as SAGA, to bring in some of those principles into the creative sector, specifically to introduce collective bargaining. So let's hear some of your thoughts. You've had several meetings, consultations with industry leaders and experts. What are your impressions so far of our creative sector and the people who run it?
Look, I've got to say, Jack, I don't want to be too rude. It's been confronting.
Yeah.
I suppose I've been used in Australia for so many years and working with unions in the United States and Britain and so on, to actors being treated with respect, managing to earn a decent living from their craft, having an ability to get income from the work that they do that is then exploited down the track. It's straight back to the 19th century in South Africa.
Really?
The way in which actors here are treated is profoundly shocking for somebody like me. It's a good lesson in what happens when you aren't able to collectively bargain in this space, when performers don't have the ability to stand together and get decent treatment. It's an opportunity, frankly, for producers and broadcasters to run rampant, to get whatever they want. I've heard a couple of clauses that are commonly put into South African contracts, one of which basically gives absolute control to the producer over any rights to the work that's produced by the performer, now and in perpetuity, in any medium now or hereinafter devised. The other shocking thing to me, particularly given South Africa's history and its commitment to human rights, is a clause that says that the artist warrants he's not a member of a guild or subject to any collective agreement. Now, what century are we living in?
That's the question.
That's just a clear breach of every South African actor's human rights. And I was pretty shocked.
You're quite right in that it is, in fact, a violation of our constitutional rights and our freedom of association.
Yeah.
What were some of the other examples that came up in your investigation of our sector and the performance industry? You must have also come across some really, really telling examples of how performers are exploited and abused.
Look, you and Carlin sent me a whole pile of horror stories. I think of the actor who turned up to an audition and was handed a real knife and told to get involved in a fight scene. I just, dear God, what the hell? Then there's the performer who was having a fight going over a waterfall.
Yeah.
There are all these kinds of things.
That was tragic.
But what shocked me was that you talk to any South African actor and you ask them the question, what's it like to be an actor in South Africa? And every single person's got their own story.
Yeah.
Actors suffer unemployment. That goes with the territory.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who you are. You've got to be prepared to tolerate being unemployed. As a result, performers in most countries in the world are low paid when you look at their annual salary.
Right.
If you had a look at the SAG-AFTRA strike in Hollywood a little while ago, when you actually dug down and talked to the ordinary performers, they were going on strike and saying, hey, we're used to being unemployed. It's no big deal not having any income. We've got, we'll get through.
Yeah.
The payoff is, though, that when you work, you earn a decent minimum salary. If your agent isn't able to negotiate above the minimum on the basis of your skill, on the basis of what you bring to the production, but you at least get a decent minimum. And on top of that, you get compensated for the overtime that you work. You get compensated for the rights that are handed over to the producer for the exploitation of the work that you produce. In South Africa, doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And while performers are prepared, I think, all over the world to accept a level of low income, you don't get rich in this business unless you're one of the big stars.
Yeah.
It's insupportable in South Africa. And let's think about what's important about that. The film and television industry in this country depends upon there being a casting pool. You can't just have 20 performers and they work from production to production across the... You have to have 4,000 or so people that you can draw on so that you get different faces in each production. How do people survive in that casting pool if when you work, you don't get properly remunerated? That's the... look, it was a revelation for me. I thought things were pretty tough here, but it really goes beyond tough.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to describe it, because we have to be seen as an industry. And as we say in SAGA, for this to be seen as an industry, there needs to be the rules in place that help to regulate the relationships of the people who work within it.
And what's absolutely clear is it's an utterly one-sided relationship.
Yeah. Producers
and broadcasters have all the power, and performers simply have none. If you think about the individual performer, any actor knows that as an individual they have no power because they turn up to auditions and there's 10 or 20 people there, their friends, their colleagues, all going for the role that they're going for. The competition is really hot. An actor hires an agent to do what? To help him or her compete with his colleagues, right? That's what the life of an actor is. So we do understand that as an individual we don't have power, but the trick is, as a collective, when actors stand together, they have enormous power. You cannot make a high-quality television program or a film unless you've got professional actors. And if performers form that collective, they have all the power in the world. The problem is in South Africa, because of their employment status as independent contractors, they've been prevented from bargaining together. And that's the big free kick that you've got. All of a sudden, the Competition Authority has said, yep, okay, you can act as a collective, away you go. And that means it opens the door to a whole new regime where you can sit opposite the producers and broadcasters as a powerful collective and say, stop treating us like this.
One of the big things, I think, just looking SAGA in South Africa and the actor unions from around the world, it's always struck me. I look, for example, we had a wonderful tour that took us to places like Sweden and Denmark and the UK. And it was incredible to us to see that there was a living culture of belonging to the union. My understanding is that the Swedish Actors Union in itself is, about 130 years old. In your experience as former president of the Australian Actors Union, Australian Equity, how do you build the culture of belonging?
The real sense of respect for the union and respect for its power is when the union goes on the front foot and runs a campaign to get something better. If I go back to my time, and it's a long time ago since I was at Equity, we got involved in the campaign to get a pension for Australian actors, so that at that time it started off at 3% of everybody's salary employers had to put into a consolidated fund. Now, the employers, of course, wanted to calculate the 3% on the basis of the minimum wage. On the other hand, we wanted the 3% calculated on the basis of the actual negotiated rate that every performer earns. And that's the struggle. Now, in that struggle, as you mobilise performers to fight for what is a completely obvious way of calculating what a pension contribution should be, people start to sit up and see what it is that the union does. And I'd apply this to your situation. Once that's happened and you've won and you celebrate the victory, performers in South Africa are going to stand up a little bit straighter, right? No longer are you the easy beats. No longer are you just fodder for the audiovisual machine. You're the people who are respected and treated with a bit of dignity. That's what this is all about.
You've been interviewing a number of people over the last few days, and I think one of the consistent themes as well, when you ask the question, what's stopping you from becoming a member to join the collective? I think one of those important themes that came up quite frequently was the fear of being isolated, the fear of being blacklisted, the fear of standing up on my own and suddenly I'm not getting any work.
Right. And my response to that is, don't stand up on your own. Right? I'm worried about you, Jack. Will you ever work again because you're so publicly associated with the guild? But the point of forming a powerful collective is that you don't have to stand up as an individual. Remember what I said earlier about we're all conscious as actors of how powerless we are as individuals. When in Australia, when a particular actor was aggrieved with the way they're being treated, I didn't want them to go to the producer and have a fight, right? Tell me about it. We'll send an organiser in and let the union have a fight on your behalf. That's what this collective is all about. I've heard a few stories about individual casts standing up for their rights and demanding a better deal from the producer, and they lose, and they all get the sack, and they're back to square one. What's proposed here is not individual casts standing up on their own. What's proposed here is the entire profession standing up for decent treatment. And you can't discriminate against the entire profession.
You're right. Correct. You've worked around the world, though. Have you ever come across a particular industry or even a country where, when you were working in that with that group, you found that there was enormous solidarity, and the solidarity alone was enough to bring about fair treatment in the workplace without forming the union structure?
No. Look, I say no quickly. You can get groups of workers coming together to fight about a particular issue, right? And they may have a victory. And there's no ongoing union organisation. Well, wait 2 years and the employer just has another go. Right?
Yeah.
This is what's going on here is the ongoing struggle for justice for South African performers. And for that, you require a collective organisation with resources. See, no matter how well you negotiate and no matter how many members sign up between now and the start date for negotiations, I don't want to disappoint you here, Jack. You are not going to win everything you want in that first negotiation. This is going to take you 10 or 20 years to get where you want to get. It took Australian Equity, all of that, British Equity, Screen Actors Guild, AFTRA, all of us. It's a process that's incremental. You've got to take the first step, and the first step leads to building an ongoing organisation.
It's good to talk to you, Michael. Glad you could join us. We're going to pick up the conversation after this break.
Brilliant.
This is where we ended for episode 1. Be sure to watch it again because this was truly a reality check for me. In episode 2, Jack and Michael continue on the conversation and they dive a little deeper. So if this episode moved you in any way, be sure to subscribe, share it with a friend, a colleague, and start a conversation. Because this is not just about the industry. It's about the people in it. This is SAGA Speaks.